I think most of you know that, well, my day job, so to speak, is being your pastor, a full-time job in and of itself. But I also have other responsibilities that have been given to me by Bishop Boyer and his predecessor, Bishop Mengling, and the chief one among those is being the editor-in-chief of Faith magazine. And this happens to be a weekend where I'm proofing an upcoming edition of the magazine. And when I received the copy of the magazine to proof on Friday afternoon at the office and sat down and began reading, it became very clear that God had something in mind for my homily this weekend, which was not the homily that I had originally been praying for and planning earlier in the week. But as I sat with the stories that will make up the September issue of Faith magazine, as I said, it became very clear that God had a completely different plan in mind, and I know that I need to pay attention to that. The September issue of the magazine focuses, as it does every year in September, on kids and youth. And there are a series of feature articles in this edition that help introduce us to some pretty amazing teenagers. Now, I know this is not true of any of the teenagers who may be gathered here today, but teens in general sometimes can be victims of stereotypes, can't they? Oh, they can be so surly at times. I'm saying, this is not true of any of the teens who happen to be gathered here today, okay? They can be so surly. They like to sleep so late in the morning. And then they stay up so late at night or early the next morning. And then they have these gadgets that they use to text people. You'd think that their thumbs would fall off as quick as they're making a move to text one another, sometimes kids who are just like 6 or 8 feet away from them. And then there is the music that they listen to. It's so loud, and I can hardly understand the lyrics. Oh, we could go on and on and on about teens other than the ones who are gathered here today. And we'd have to say that, yeah, some of those stereotypes are unfortunately based somewhere in truth and the keen observation of parents throughout the years. And yet, in this edition of the magazine, as I said, there are some wonderful feature stories about some teens who I think are trying to teach us a very powerful lesson in concert with the gospel this morning. I think of one young man whose name is Kevin. He lives up in the Flint area and is a member of a parish up there. And Kevin spends a good portion every summer working as a part of what's called Catholic Heart Youth Camp, which is a work camp that takes place, at least in this case, up in the Flint area, although they happen all around the country during the course of the summertime. And Kevin, along with 100 or so young people who gather there every year from all across the country, then fan out, not only through Flint, but on into even areas of the Thumb. And what do? They do all kinds of great things. They help to repair broken down homes, painting ballpark fences, places that need to be spruced up, spending time with older folks, and so on and so on. Kevin says that he would not miss this opportunity for anything in the world. He's been doing this since he was an 8th grader, and now he's going to be a junior in high school this year. And every year he looks forward to this opportunity, every summer, to use the gifts of his hands, the ingenuity of his mind, and the love in his heart. Because, after all, teens don't have a lot of material possessions other than the things maybe that their parents provide them with, but, they're not earning big salaries. They don't have 401ks or anything like that. And then, of course, there's a group of young people from Catholic Central High School in Lansing, and they are engaged in a different kind of work camp. This one takes them every year down to Louisiana. They've been going down there ever since Hurricane Katrina. So that's going on 5 years ago now. And every year they go down to the Gulf area. The first year they were helping to rebuild homes and clean up the damage after the hurricane. But every year since, they've been working on a variety of different projects there in and around the Gulf area. These 3 young people who have been friends for quite some time, they were actually working together on one project one day, helping an older lady with her home, repairing her front porch, if I remember correctly, when a woman in the neighborhood drove by, and she stopped and she actually got out of her car and she asked the kids, "What are you doing here?" And the kids explained, and she harumphed, and she got back in her car and drove away. And a little while later, she came back with snacks and drinks for the kids. She said, "You know what? I really appreciate the fact that kids who aren't from around here, who come from way up north, are taking the time to come and make the difference in our community here. And then she just got in her car and drove away. And then I think of other young people that I know right here in our own parish, a group of them who got together to organize a fundraiser for Jack Armstrong as he continues to recover from his battle with leukemia. The kids put together a terrific fundraiser which has already raised $6,000 and we're still counting. The idea for the fundraiser and almost all of the heavy lifting and organizing was done by the kids themselves. We adults didn't have an awful lot that was needed other than to be kind of a gentle guiding hand through it all. The kids put it all together and they pulled it off beautifully. Then I think of another group of young people from here in the parish who are going to join with the youth group up at St. Joseph Parish in St. John's for a fundraiser called Dancing for Those Who Can't. They're going to be raising funds for RAVE, which stands for Relief After Violent Encounter, a shelter that helps to fight domestic abuse by providing a safe place for moms with young children. They're undertaking that fundraiser, and I'm sure they're going to meet their goal and probably exceed it. That's something that they're doing. And there are other stories that are of a similar vein that I've been editing for the September issue, and I sat there thinking on Friday evening as I finished that section of the magazine, and I read about these teens. What happened to me? What happened to us adults? I was once like these kids in some way. All of us who are adults were like these kids in some way. What happened to pull all of that out of us? How did we wind up being sometimes like the guy in the parable in the gospel today? Sometimes incredibly obsessed about things. Bigger barns, more stuff. How did we morph from kids, teenagers, who were filled with ingenuity and energy and love and plenty of time to give, into adults who are sometimes very different? And then we hear this parable from Jesus, which challenges us to our very core, especially for the place that we live and the time in which we live. The parable challenges us, but it's also important to understand why the parable would have been very challenging in Jesus' time. You see, the community in which that man would have lived would have looked up to him. But they also would have expected that one who knew tremendous blessing would share those blessings with the community, especially with the poor and the marginalized, to help them out. And so it would have been a gigantic affront to the community for the man to act in the way that he does, by hoarding it all for himself and building his bigger barns, kind of as a sign, and thumbing his nose, for lack of a better way to put it, at the rest of the community. That's what would have been so hurtful in the story that Jesus tells. Not that the man was rich, but that he was greedy, and he kept it for himself. As a nation, and in much of the developed world over the last year and a half or 2 years, we've experienced a set of events that I hope are edging us away from being so concerned sometimes about the material goods and about the need for bigger barns in which to keep them. But I also have come to understand, just in my own prayer and reflection, especially in concert with the stories of those teens in the upcoming edition of the magazine, that these teens and their love, their desire to use the ingenuity of their hands, the brilliance of their minds, and the love in their hearts, because that's what they've got. They don't have the material stuff, is the perfect corrective against what Jesus speaks of in the parable, being overly concerned with stuff. These kids and Jesus are trying to teach us, I think, that maybe we shouldn't be so concerned about building bigger barns to have a place to put all the stuff in. Maybe what we should be most concerned about is working in concert with Jesus and responding to his grace to allow him to build in us bigger hearts.